Hey everybody, Graham Brown from Asia Tech Podcast in the ATP studio in Singapore. Every day bringing you one insight from my new series, Asia Matters. We'll talk about why Asia matters, not just to the world, but also to itself. We're going to look at startups and the latest trends in technology. Starting in Singapore today is a great place because we're going to talk about food. Singapore is a great food city. It's also a market which attracts a lot of players from outside of Asia hoping to crack the Asian market. It's a soft landing for many food startups, but not all of them are successful. So let's have a look at the news today. And this is news from today, which says that US startup MealPal is hoping to crack the Singapore food on demand market. Let's have a look at their offer. Now, bear in mind that the Singapore market already has Deliveroo, Foodpanda, Fastbee, and Plum. So MealPal will line up alongside these services. Although it's not a delivery service, what it hopes to do is a little bit of a different offer. For $95.88, so $96, about 60 plus US dollars, you get 12 lunch meals at restaurants in specific areas of Singapore, which need to be redeemed in 30 consecutive days. And these can be hawker meals or some of the participating chains that are part of the MealPal setup. It's available at 4 business hubs across Singapore. So will it work? Well, to be honest, it's a very competitive market. I don't think it's necessarily going to come down to having the best offer or the cheapest offer in particular. It's going to come down to this keyword, this key insight for cracking the Asian markets, and that is empathy. And it's something that we talked about in the last couple of weeks on Asia Tech Podcast here in the studio. And I want to draw your attention to an interview that we did recently with Scott Bales and Claire Ball from Innovation Labs Asia. Now, Scott made some very interesting points about empathy and how empathy is key to success and failure in Asian markets. Now, Scott has worked in 48 markets in Asia. So if you want to learn about the Asian consumer, if you want to learn about empathy, go and check out that interview on our YouTube channel. All the details in the show notes for this particular Asia Matters show. We also shared 3 stories recently about food startups that have come to Singapore hoping to crack that market, and just from different angles, very, very different angles and takes on the food startup. So we have Little Oak Organics, who were importing New Zealand, so Kiwi organic milk for Asian consumers. That was a fascinating story. Go and check that one out if you're interested in that particular startup. Love 18 were a very different take entirely. They were a Penang, so Malaysian-based startup who were making artisan chocolates, bringing those artisan chocolates to Singapore and installing outreach or, sort of installations in Singapore, trying to be the Apple or the Zappos of chocolates for the Asian markets. And how did they do that? And how important empathy was to, not just their success, but also building a team that really understands Asian consumers. And lastly, a different take entirely, we had Clement Oshar, who runs Epicurio, which is a wine platform. So we talked about empathy. We talked about the importance of understanding the growing Asian middle classes. And those middle classes are growing from 700 million, in 2009 to 3.5 or just over 3 billion in 2030. So that massive explosion in Asian middle classes. And you can think about how those services that we just talked about, all those food startups, so wine in the case of Epicurio, chocolate in the case of Love 18, and in the case of Little Oak Organics, organic milk, and how important the Asian middle classes are to their growth. But even more importantly, how important it is to have empathy for those Asian consumers. So to the point about MealPal, will they be successful like any other startup coming into Asia? It's not necessarily having the best technology. It's not necessarily having the cheapest offer or the best startup in terms of, the idea and so on. I think it's going to come down to empathy for the Asian consumer. Let's see. My name's Graham Brown. This is Asia Matters. What do you think? So going back to the Grab Uber example, was that all about empathy? Were Grab successful because they had more empathy for Asian consumers than Uber did? Be interesting to hear your thoughts and comments. You can put them in the comments below. I'll be back tomorrow with one more Asia Matters.